Hi, I'm Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Christy, and we work with Globe International.
Working with missionaries, we hear stories of the struggles, the humor, God's goodness, and a little side of crazy.
Hey, that's who we are.
This is Crazy Missionary Stories. Hello, and welcome back to Crazy Missionary Stories. Today we have Brian and Mary Beth Stubenrauch, who were serving in Thailand for 22 years. So guys, will you start out by telling us a little bit about what you were doing in Thailand?
So we went to Thailand in 2001, November 2001. We were married in September 2001. So it was 3 months. So we got married, waited 3 months, moved to Thailand. Our goal was to plant churches among unreached people. So we went to the south, the deep south, which was the most unreached area, one of the most unreached areas of Thailand. It was a high Muslim population, also a high Buddhist population. But we went there, we couldn't speak one word. Actually, Mary Beth, you could speak Thai. So I remember on our honeymoon, we were on this lazy river at the hotel we were staying at, and Mary Beth is teaching me the Thai numbers as we're floating around in the circle. And I'm saying them all wrong, but so we went with the heart to see people saved in the unreached areas of Thailand. That was our main goal, specifically Muslims.
Yeah, we didn't really end up working with Muslims as much. We ended up more with Buddhists, and the city that we landed in was, they said about half and half, but I don't think it was. I think it was more Buddhist population for sure. And so I was 21 and he was 27, married 3 months. We started language school, and then not too long after that found out we were expecting our first child, and now we're 43 and almost 50. So yeah, that seems like a lifetime ago.
We say this a lot. We feel like we would never tell anybody to do our story because it was pretty crazy. It's like usually you don't want somebody to move to the mission field 3 months after they got married. It's kind of asking for problems, but it seemed to work for us.
And we lived on different continents while we were engaged.
That's true. Yeah, we were like physically on the same continent 1 month before we got married, I think. Most of our dating, courtship, whatever you want to call it, was done with instant messenger, and that was in the day of dial-up, that crazy
AOL.
Juno
Wow.
instant messenger.
And then we switched to AOL though, right? Which one had the
I think that was AOL,
Yes,
right?
we did that. But I didn't even have a computer. I used my roommate's computer, and sometimes the internet would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And then I ended up in Thailand on an internship while he was in Trinidad, and if it rained, there was no internet connection. So if it started to sprinkle, I'd try to get on my computer. If it didn't work, I'd run to this computer shop down the road, and I actually had to download instant messenger on the computer shop's computer so that we could talk. It's raining. I can't meet you at 8:00 or whatever.
I remember we cherished those calls. It was you get on your computer, you dial up, and then you get in the instant messenger. When you hear that little door open, the little creak, we just you're like get all excited. Wow, I wonder if it's Mary Beth.
Butterflies.
So, Mary Beth, where were you at the time?
I was in America for part of it, and then in Thailand for part of that time, and he was in Trinidad.
Okay, that's cool. So let's go back a little bit. I want to know how you guys met, and then I want to know how you guys felt called to missions, either individually or as a couple.
We met at Brownsville Revival School Ministry, so we were both attending there. We were in our last month, I think, of school, right? Yeah, so we were in our last month of school. I really felt like God had called me to Bangladesh. So that was my last probably year of Bible school. I was pretty focused. That's where I was going. Remember I talked to Frontiers, and they said, yeah, we have people there. And studying about it, praying about it. And I said that I'll marry the first girl I meet that's called there, because I just figured no girl would be called there. And so
It would be a sign from God.
yeah, so I just thought if I met somebody that's called there, it's got to be God, And well, you were thinking the same thing, right?
Yes, I really felt called to Bangladesh too. And so I told my roommates I'm going to marry the first man I meet going to Bangladesh.
That's crazy.
My mom kept saying, you don't want to go single to the mission field. Isn't there some nice boy around there that wants to go too? And I'm like, Mom, I'm going with or without a man. I don't care. God's called me. I think I was hoping for a husband to go with me to Bangladesh, though. So a mutual friend. We didn't know each other at all. We'd been through Bible school, and we actually were on a ministry trip together, and we never met ever. Yeah. And he said, I know this kid, real tall, good-looking kid, who's called to Bangladesh. I want to introduce you. And I said, okay. And so then he did, and I guess the rest is history.
We met at the back of the room they called the Blue, and it was a building just over here that now Teen Challenge. No, they just tore it down actually. Yeah, so we met in the very back of that room. They would post our grades with our Social Security number, maybe some kind of number that was ours.
What?
Hopefully not our Social Security number. I don't know. Student ID number maybe, and so you could go back to the back of the room and you could find your grades. And I was back there looking at my grades the same time Mary Beth was looking at her grades. And we were introduced by Nathan, and we talked. And I remember thinking the first thing is like, I don't think she's really called to Bangladesh. But then as I was going back to my seat, and I looked over and I saw her walking back to her seat, and I just had this thought, she could be the one. Yeah. And then pretty much I stalked her after that. Right? So.
Yes, on breaks or everywhere I was. I would look, there's Brian again. Wow, I just met this guy, and he's here again. I'd be worshiping Jesus, closing my eyes, opening my, oh, hi, there's Brian again, worshiping right next to me.
You're not very incognito because you're so tall. Can't really blend in, can you?
No, I can't. But the funny thing is, like, I pretty much went through Bible school not interested in anybody. I didn't even have any friends. I just thought, I had some friends, but I didn't do much. I just basically went to class, went to my room, studied and prayed, and that was about all I did. Some guys that were there to find their wife and vice versa, and it was like within the first chance, we had like a semester where we weren't allowed to date, right? Or a year. It was a semester. Yeah, so it was like after that first semester, there's all these engagements. It was like, well, these people are going to get married. Oh, these people are a thing. It's like, so obviously they've been kind of working on it when they weren't supposed to. But, yeah, so I wasn't doing that. It was just, we met, and I just felt like, wow, this is right. And, yeah, and it was. Yeah, we
exchanged pictures we printed off the internet from Bangladesh, and I got this missionary biography. Yeah, I got that one too. Well, I have a Bengali Bible. Yeah, I got one too. That was our pickup lines, I guess. I don't know. I want to know why you didn't think I was called to Bangladesh, though. Is there a reason?
No, I don't know. I just didn't. But I changed my mind real quick.
I guess.
I tried to impress her with all of my already missionary stories of going in out of the jungle of Guyana, and I told her all my crazy stories.
Eyeballs staring off the savannah in the dark when you put your flashlight up there at night, and you can see the light flashing back from the animals in the jungle. And I push boats through the waters, and there's piranhas in those waters.
Well, obviously it worked.
I guess it did.
Oh, well, so tell me how it went from Bangladesh to Thailand.
So Brian went to Trinidad on an internship and lived with a Trini family, a pastor and his family. And then I did an internship to Thailand, and there was 2 other families that we had gotten together in like a small group, and Brian was in Trinidad though, but I was with these other 2 families, and they said, hey, what if we all give up our locations and we just go somewhere together? And so, like, what if we go to our missions director and say, where can you send us? And so he said, that's what we did. But I was kind of like, well, I don't know, because I have to think about Brian, you know. And so I ended up going on my internship to Thailand. And then on that trip, the missions director had said, why don't you all go to the south, because it's an unreached area, and we have, actually, Globe missionaries were there. And so why don't you go check that out? And so there was a small team of us who were single and went down to South Thailand to see what was going on there and where, if there was like a place we could land and learn language and have some community and, what we should do. And so we did that trip, and then Brian and I were praying about it because we knew we were going to get married when I was coming back from Thailand and he was coming back from Trinidad. And then the other families said, yeah, let's do it. And so it was a trip. Actually, I was like 20, right? 21. And these two other families were waiting in America going, tell us about it. What was it like? Should we live there? And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that's a lot, for a 21-year-old to tell families with children, oh yeah, it's great, move over here, or no, don't, like change the course of your life, And so we talked about it and prayed about it, and it just ended up, we said, well, we'll just go to South Thailand for a few years, and then we'll move on to Bangladesh, and we'll be with this team for a while. And then I don't know, after we learned the language, it was like, I'm never doing that again. And Asian language is hard. So, and then we ended up being teammates for like 10 years with the other families. And so, yeah, it was a gradual thing. It wasn't a lightning strike or anything like that.
But over the years, we would come across these people that, yeah, we're missionaries in Bangladesh. And we meet them and we look at each other. You're like, maybe, maybe. There's still kind of sometimes we're like, maybe, maybe.
I was going to ask that. Do you ever have that thought like, well, maybe we can go now, like even just to go visit? Or
usually when we're at the most extreme culture shock, we're like, let's go somewhere else, anywhere.
You mean in America, since we moved back
yeah,
to America?
In America or Thailand or anywhere. It's like you're facing those real intense moments where you're like, get me out of here. And you're like, hey, maybe God's calling me to Bangladesh again.
That's great. I think Lindsay mentioned it earlier. I'd love to hear, how did you guys get into missions in the first place? What was that spark that lit the fire for you?
I always loved missionaries. When they came to our church when I was a little girl, it was my favorite time. It was my favorite Sundays of the year, Sunday nights. Whenever they were going to be there, that was my absolute favorite time. I loved to hear the stories, see all the things that they'd bring. Nobody does that anymore. Sets out the table with their pottery and their hats and fabric. And we used to all do that 20 years ago when we first came back, and make boards of pictures. And yeah, so I loved that when I was a little girl. And I used to go to this Christian camp in the summer, and they would always have a missionary emphasis, or like a missionary that we would collect our pennies for, whatever. And I remember even as a little girl, like I just look back now and I know it was Jesus, but that's all I wanted to like save my canteen money and not buy suckers and Cokes, because I wanted to give my money to the missionaries. And I think that had to be the love of God, the stirring of the Holy Spirit in my heart, even just as a little girl.
I didn't think about missions at all as a child. What happened with me was I had this really dramatic conversion. Like it was like this 180 degrees. It was drugs and all kinds of stuff, and really had this powerful encounter with the Lord that changed my life. I was in my junior year of college, 1996, and I just felt up to that point I just wanted to have fun and get high and get rich one day. That was all. But my thinking changed. I mean, I don't know how those all go together. They don't really, but I thought it would. And so I had this powerful encounter, and it changed the way I thought. Like really it was like God was making up for lost time. He just like really was like, okay, now hurry up. We're going to be doing some stuff here. And so then I started thinking, well, I don't want to get rich anymore, and I want to just serve Jesus some way or somehow. And I didn't know how to do that. I started going I asked my pastor, and I started going out with somebody that was going out on the streets every Friday night, and they would show films on the side of this wall where these guys would do illegal gambling inside and stuff. And so she was talking to me one day. She's like, what are you going to do when you graduate from college? And I said, well, I don't know. She said, well, I know this guy in Trinidad, and I'd like to send you to visit him. You just go visit him and just see what God does. And so I did. I went there, and he picked me up from the airport. On the way home, he was talk with me, asking me about myself, and I said, "Well, I don't preach. I don't get in front of people. I don't want to do that kind of thing, you know." And he said, "Okay." And then the next day, he's like, "And Brother Brian's here with us in this church meeting, and he's going to give us a testimony." And so I had to give testimony. He had me preach my first sermon when I was there. He told me ahead of time. He said, "Okay." He showed me this file cabinet of all his sermons that he'd written over the years. He could use any of this material you're going to preach on Sunday morning. And I thought, I can't do this. You know, and every time I would tell him, this is the guy I did the year internship with at a Bible school, by the way. I would say, I can't do that. And he'd say, you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. That was always his answer. I got really annoyed with that answer. But so I did. I preached like 15 minutes. I worked really hard, and it was really hard. And I remembered sitting in his office on my knees praying, and it was hot, and there were some bugs in there, and his dogs were barking outside rather loudly. His dog seemed to bark constantly. And I remember just sitting there saying, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I feel like in that moment is when God called me to be a missionary. And so then when I came back, I said, well, I'm just going to go on mission trips. So I started taking trips in and out of Guyana into Haiti, and just kept going on trips as often as I could. After I graduated from college, I had this job offer working in Seattle area at a water ski company as marketing rep and making pretty good money. It was a really good offer, and I turned it down. I just didn't have peace about it, and ended up working in a fried chicken restaurant. And it was my preparation, I think, for the mission field, and a lot of that was. And the guy that owned it, he went to our church, and he asked me if I wanted to come work there. He said, I'll give you any time off you want to go on mission trip. So I worked at fried chicken, went on mission trips. One trip into the interior of Guyana, I had planned to just stay there. I wasn't going to come back. And we'd done this crazy trip. It was 24 hours in the boat to get to this one place we went to, and it was no believers, and it was crazy, wild, amazing things happened. And we're on our way back, and I'm sitting in the boat looking up the stars that seem to go on forever in the rainforest. And I said, God, thank you so much that I can do this for the rest of my life. Thank you so much that I can just stay here. And, I don't really hear God's voice audibly. I never have, but I knew he said, no, you're not. You're not doing that. You're going to Bible school.
Robert said that too.
Yeah, and I talked to Robert about it, and he says, no, you need to go to Bible school. You can't stay here. And he's one of the leaders of the ministry there. And thank God for their foresight. I was just young, and I had no plans for visa, for finances. I had no plans. I'm just going to stay here and live here. So that was when I went to Bible school. And then when I was in Bible school, God called me to unreached people groups. And that's where I was impacted by people that have never heard the gospel. And I said, God, send me to the people nobody wants to go to. Send me to those hard places. And God took me up on it. It's pretty much what we've done.
And I also prayed that prayer. Before we knew each other, that was also my heart. And, as I grew up, and I ended up on a mission trip as a teenager in Ecuador. And I remember walking through the streets of this village, and I said the same thing. God, if you will let me do this, this is what I'll do for the rest of my life. This is what I want to do. And I ended up coming back and then went to Bible school. I went on several trips to India and Philippines and different places. Thailand actually was a short-term trip where we met Belle and Julie. I met Belle and Julie Hughes when I was just 18.
And for people listening, those are Globe missionaries, veteran Globe missionaries in Thailand.
So there was also that moment for me, I remember praying, okay, when I really surrendered my life as a teenager, I remember praying and telling God, I'll go where you want me to go. I'll do what you want me to do, whatever it is. And I remember praying, God, send me to the people that nobody wants to go to. So it's amazing when we met each other and, as we were learning one another and realizing we had prayed some of the same prayers, and we were going with or without a spouse. We were going because God had called us. And I actually think it's a huge strength on the mission field, because there are sometimes that one spouse really wants to go and one spouse that doesn't. One spouse kind of tags along, and I mean that's amazing that a spouse would go across the ocean to support the call or the dreams of another spouse. But I thank God that we both knew we were called, because you go through crazy stuff. I mean, hard things. And just knowing that we were called and knowing what God had done to get us there. And, all the times, he had spoken to us or brought us into or out of a place, just knowing that that's where we were supposed to be. So that's why we never dreamed we would even be back in America ever. I mean, if we needed to come back and take care of our parents or our kids or, for a short time, that's what we were thinking, a few years.
Talk to us about what it was like in Thailand. I mean, 22 years? And you guys lived in the village?
We lived everywhere. We lived in the city. We lived in the village. There's not a lot of in between in Thailand, actually. You're either in the city or in the village. You go right outside the city and there's rice field.
But you lived right among the people.
We did, yes. Yeah. From the time we landed.
Right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of grit. There's a lot of transition in that. And then living there. And there's transition coming back because you lived your life there. Talk to us about what was that like?
When you first got there, did you have culture shock? Like, what was the process like coming from America to Thailand? What kind of house did you live in? Give us all the details.
All the nitty gritty.
I want to hear it all.
I think
you were 21 and
21 and 27. Yes. I'm not sure it's grit so much as stupidity sometimes, because you just make up your mind, this is what God's called me to. There were certain non-negotiables that I just never thought. I was going to have my babies there. We were going to homeschool. I never even thought of options.
You said you were going to have your babies there. You weren't leaving.
Right. Yeah, I was.
So you made it home from day one. It was home.
That's what we were doing. We had been, taught all the stories of the missionaries who packed their things in coffins and left. And we knew we didn't have to do that anymore. But we landed, so we got married in September, right before September 11th. So it was September 1st, 2001. And so even just days after we were married, September 11th happened. And our first thought was, are we going to be able to leave the country? Are we going to be able to go now? But we landed in November, and we stayed with some missionary friends. We couldn't find a house to rent anywhere, and I don't know why that was exactly. Maybe we just didn't know what we were looking for. Because we made a few friends, and there was a little cafe right down the road, and she had learned English by learning to make. Oh, she studied in Australia, I think. And so she was our good friend because she was one of the only people who could speak English. And so she ended up helping us go around. And anyway, we found a house to live in, but we lived with teammates. They had a 3-story row house. So row houses are connected on both walls, on both sides. And they had 3 kids, and she was pregnant with their 4th. And we lived in the very tippy top of their 3 stories. And we just would go look for houses, and not too long after we landed there, I was pregnant with Asia. And so immediate morning sickness set in. We finally did find a house, but it took them a while it was in pretty bad shape, but the landlord fixed it for us, the holes that the rats had chewed in the window and the leaky roof. And he even bricked up between, because it was a row house too, but it was on the end. So we had a little tiny strip of grass, and he bricked up between the 2 houses so that nobody could climb over and come down into our house through the roof.
In the ceiling area. So up above the ceiling in these row houses, they're completely open all the way across. So he bricked all the way up to the top so nobody could climb into our house from the other row houses.
Because it's like drop ceiling tiles, like these, or like in schools. So, yeah, sometimes at night I would lay there and go, if those bricks fall over.
Yikes.
Because they're just, Anyway, that's just a thought, neither here nor there. But
I don't think I thought of that one time.
That's the difference between men and women.
So our house was cute. We had a little upstairs and a little downstairs. And if the electricity went off, we still had water downstairs because we didn't need a pump to get the water. And if the water went off, but the electricity didn't, we still had water upstairs because the electricity would pump the water upstairs. So we were good. Whether the water was off, because we had a tank, whether the water was off or the electricity was off, except one night, both went off in the middle of hot season, and I was pregnant, and I thought, I'm just going to die. I can't breathe.
I think, too, it's good to know what the climate of not just like weather climate, but what it was like, because it was September 11th just happened. It's a highly Muslim area where we're living, and a lot of people were pretty excited about what happened on that day. And there were T-shirts celebrating Osama bin Laden and the Twin Towers falling. And even one time we got into an elevator with a bunch of young people, and they asked us in their very broken English if we were from America. We said yes, and they said boom, and they all started laughing. And so that's kind of what we headed into. A lot of the missionaries in the area that were working to reach Muslims were saying things like, watch out for being kidnapped and be careful where you go. And so, but for us, I don't think I was ever scared. I don't think I ever thought about it. We were newlyweds, so we were basically just 3 months married. And I think the more challenging thing was with the team, because we're newlyweds and we just wanted to be together all the time. And then the guys have been married for a while, and they're having guys' nights out, and they're inviting me like, hey, come with us. And I'm like, no, I'm going to hang out with my wife. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because we just got married, It's like, I want to be with her. And they're like, well, you need some time away. I'm like, well, I don't want to yet. And I'm like, we're having fun.
Well, in language school, too, I would say that's super important to anybody who wants to be a missionary. There was a missionary couple who came. They had been on the field forever in different countries, and they came and taught a week at this class we did. And I remember the wife saying, you wives learn the language just as well or better than your husbands, because there's going to be one day where there's a fight in the street and you don't know what's going on, or somebody's knocking on your door loudly and you don't know if it's an emergency or if it's an angry person. You're going to have phone calls. And so make sure you know the language, as well or better than your husband, which was no problem for me because we were in a competition. Not really. Maybe a little bit. I got behind because I was so sick in bed with pregnancy. And so then I was really jealous that he got ahead of me. So I had to make up for it. I was very motivated to learn the language. It was not an option in my mind. Never thought, oh, I can't do this, or it's not going to happen, or maybe I'll just stop now. Never. It was a non-negotiable. And I think it should be a non-negotiable, because your life is there, and every bit of your life is there. And if you have children, your children's lives are there, and you have doctor's appointments, and you have emergencies, and you have daily life, and you have friends, and you have to know what's going on around you, and your kids have to know that you know what's going on around you. And it's too much pressure on one spouse or the other. That doesn't mean that both spouses equally get the language. That's something that's a challenge for a lot of couples, where one spouse will just get the language a lot easier than the other one, or to take a lot less time. That was me, right? That you got it easier than me?
Yeah.
Well, you studied more than I did.
I didn't get it easier than she did.
He's the book studier, though. He would lock himself in the room and study our books, our language school books, and listen to the tapes over and over. And the tapes. See, that's how. And
dates you.
And then I would say, let's go out and drink some tea with people. And then that's the way I learned, is just, I'd studied. I would go over my lessons like 15 minutes before class. Like, oh, quick. Oh, I forgot to do my homework. I'm going to be in trouble with the teacher. And he's like, I don't know how you do that. And I was like, I don't know how you do that. But it was just two different styles. It was a lot easier for me to sit and converse with people and learn the language. So that was another challenge, though, actually, in our marriage in the early years, because of the different ways we even studied and learned. We had one cell phone between us.
There was a guy named Mitch Atkins that was there, and he was married to an amazing, godly Thai woman. They had a family, and he could speak fluent Thai. He was from New Zealand, and I think he was an accountant, right? Before he was a lawyer. No, Paul was the accountant, right? And then, so I think Mitch was the lawyer, and he said learning Thai was the single most hardest thing he'd ever done in his life. But he told me this, and I never forgot it. And I've told a lot of new missionaries to Thailand the same thing. He said it's like getting on a train. He said if you get on the train, as long as you don't get off the train, you're going to reach the destination. But if you get off the train, you're not going to get there. You're not going to get the language. And it's so true. I saw so many missionaries come over, and they're like, it gets hard. They feel like they're not improving. They get off the train, and they kind of stick at that spot with the language. And as long as you keep learning, and I don't think you ever reach the destination, really.
People will say, how long did it take you to learn Thai? And I say, I will never stop learning Thai as long as I live.
It's interesting, too, because you learn a certain kind of Thai in the classroom, and then you go out and you're around the people, and then you're learning a different Thai with them. And so the more you're around the people, the more it just becomes natural. And even to the point now, it's sometimes I'm talking to people, I can only think the Thai word. Because you start thinking the language, you're thinking the language first, and then you're like thinking. So at first you're translating from English to Thai, and then you start just speaking Thai. It's just their first thoughts, and then sometimes when you speak English, you're going from Thai to English, and so it gets a little confusing sometimes.
How did you guys learn the language then? Did you take a year when you first got there? You said this year we're focusing on culture and language, or did you just immerse yourself and you spent time daily for a very long time? Or what did it look like? I know you learned differently, but how did you dedicate it towards that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we had our missions director at the time with a different organization told us the first 2 years of your life in Thailand, this is your job. This is a hard language. He had lived in Asia also. And he said, that this is what you're doing. This is your full-time job. You love each other. You have healthy marriages. You learn Thai. You take turns learning Thai. If you have children, the husbands watch the kids while the wife is in Thai. The wife watches the kids while the husband's in Thai. This is what you're going to do. You're going to learn how to eat. You're going to learn how to live. You're going to learn how to pay your bills and learn language. And it was the best thing. It's very freeing when an organization or a person, a leader, tells you that this is your job, because you feel like you're going over there and you need to right away do ministry. So there were some things that we did along the way. We taught English. That's actually one way that we got our visa in the early days. There was an English center from a church in Singapore that was had started, and they just needed English teachers. And so we would go to language school during the day, and then in the evening we'd teach English lessons and hang out with the teenagers. And it was a lot of fun. It was a low pressure. I think sometimes too, the longer we live in a place, the more we feel like we need to produce something. And so we've had moves over the years where we just started over again, pretty much in a different region of Thailand. And we'd think, we gotta get going. And I'd remind myself, those early years in a place, you are making relationships, you're learning dialect, you're learning how to feed your family. I mean, the foods are different, what's available is different. And so to give ourselves some grace with every transition, now even transitioning back to the States, giving ourselves some grace to figure out how to live here again. But I think it's important to remember that even as in transitions on the field, moving from one city to another, one region to another, some people go country to country, and you think, well, I've been doing this for a long time, so there's no excuses. But really, you have to start over and just figure out how to live in a place for a good long while. And that's what we did when we first got there. We just made friends. We went to tea shops. We ate at restaurants. It was like $1 for a meal when we first got there, or less, actually. Wait, it wasn't. 50 cents.
It's like 25 baht, right? So
it was like 50 cents or something.
Exchange rate was like 43 or 44 during that time.
Yeah. So that's what we did. We just tried to live life and meet people, have people over to our house and play games and anything that we could think of, one friend, even I was like, come to my house, I'll teach you how to bake American cakes. Whatever it was, we would have some of the English students over. We had a family that was next door, and we said, we'll teach your daughter English once a week for free, which was, out of their minds. And so then she would bring us food. So then that's how we got introduced to so many different foods, because it was like in her mind, we were teaching her daughter English, but she was going to teach us about Thailand. And so every week she would bring me another food to try, another thing. And then I would say, oh, this is amazing. Where did you get this? I'll take you to the market, or I'll bring the ingredients and we'll make it together.
Wow, that's neat.
That
So it
is
really
so cool.
developed the relationship through that. That was just the starting point.
There was a guy that I was about 15 years in the field at this time, and there was a team with the IMB that they had the only hospital in Thailand that was still run by foreigners, missionaries. And so at this point in Thailand, it's just Thai people that are allowed to have medical license. But there's this one guy, Dr. Doug, this amazing missionary that's been there for many, many years, and he has a license to practice medicine in Thailand. And so he does these free medical clinics in the more remote areas to just help people get medicine and care that they can't normally get. And so this team came, and there was another guy there, and I cannot remember his name right now, really neat guy, but he'd been in Thailand for like 35 years at this point, and he said, yeah, we're getting ready to retire in a year from now, and him and his wife were there. I was in the car with them, and I said, okay, I've been here for 15 years. Tell me what you would want to tell yourself at this point. And he said, well, I've done a lot of different conferences and seminars and learning new methodology of how to reach people and how to reach a lot of people. So what I've learned is you just need to reach the one that's before you, and you need to do it well. And so I feel like if I had that one thing I could tell myself at the start of it all and follow that through, because we did that at the beginning, but then you kind of get into this thing of like, I got to have the good newsletter stories, and so you start doing all these things, you start thinking the big numbers, and a lot of times you kind of lose sight of the one that's just before you that God has you to reach and disciple and lead closer to him. And we did adopt that into our life a lot. And I remember when we went to a very remote area, we lived in this village for about 6.5 years, and I had great visions of seeing the whole region completely, with house churches everywhere and completely reached. It was very unreached. We were the only missionaries in the entire province. And, you talk to people, they knew nothing about Jesus. And we were there 6.5 years, and there was 2 guys, basically, that I was able to share with, and they were both Christians already. And when I left there, I thought, well, we didn't do much there. But now if you look back and you see this one guy, they started a church, these 2 guys, they started a church together, and they planted 3 or I think 4 now other groups in areas where we labored and worked and went and shared the gospel in these places that had no church, no believers, and no fruit. Nobody was interested, and now there's groups started there in these places. So you see the importance of the one when you do that. Yeah.
And that place was really an amazing place too, because there had been Finnish missionaries that had come like 30, 40 years before us and had just labored in this whole region. And they had seen a few believers and planted a church in the city, but there was just a couple little pockets of believers throughout the like the countryside, I guess, there. And so when we were in South Thailand and we felt like God was calling us to a different place, we were praying about it. We just didn't know where he wanted. I think we never thought we'd leave the South. We never thought we'd leave South Thailand. And we were praying about where he wanted us. And so Brian came in one day and he goes, I've been praying and I feel like the Lord just said, Loi. And in Thai, that word is like just to go for it. And he's like, I just think God is telling us, God is saying, this is right. Just go for it. Just do it. Loi means like to go past something. It's like an exclamation point almost. And so I said, okay, well, good. I feel good about it. Let's do it. And so he's like, well, let's just keep praying. And I don't know, weeks, days later, he came in one day and he was so excited. I was probably changing somebody's diaper because we had lots of little kids. And he goes, Mary Beth, I've been looking at the map of Thailand and there's a province. See, we lived in the South, so our whole world was in the South. We didn't know much even about any of the other provinces, just the ones in the South. And he goes, there's a province and it's called Loy. I said, you're kidding. And he goes, no, it's up here. It's on the border of Laos. And there's a province. Maybe that's what God was saying. And so I said, all right. So we went on this exploratory trip and we took our 4 little kids who were like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, and 6 maybe. Wow. And yeah, we just went and said, okay, kids, pray with us. Or the older 2 girls that were 4 and 6. We said, pray with us. We feel like God wants us to move. And so we went to these 3 different places, and Loy was one of the places we went to. And it was just amazing to see, God had spoken. But we got there and we kept saying, are there any Christians here? Are there any believers there? We went to different places and we couldn't find any Christians in the area. So we said, well, this must be unreached. And so one night we passed a market. It was a bigger market because sometimes in Thailand, like one night a week, there'll be an extra big market where everybody comes in from different like townships around. And so I said, just drop me off so we didn't have to take the kids out, into all the crazy, massive amounts of people. And I'm just going to go ask. And so I just went stall to stall and bought these sweets and bought whatever, pork on a stick or whatever. And I'd say, hey, we're new around here. We're Christians. Do you know of any Christians? And they're like, you're what? I said, we're followers of Jesus. Do you know who Jesus is? I think I've heard of him before. I said, do you have anybody who follows Jesus in this area? We'd really like to meet him. And some of them she's like, I don't know what she's talking about. What's she talking about? And so she, a grumpy grandma. And this other lady's like, well, there's one who works at the hospital. She's a Christian. And so I said, that's the only one? They're like, yep, that's it. That's the only one we know of. And so we just drove to the hospital. And so we got out and I said, the nurses were standing there at the emergency room. It's because it's like an outdoor counter in Thailand. And I said, this is really weird. I know this is strange, but we're here from another province and we believe in Jesus. And we were just wondering if there's anybody around here who believes in Jesus too. And we heard there was a nurse and they go, oh, there is, but she's on maternity leave right now. She just had a baby. They're like, but hang on, she's our friend. We'll just call her and you can talk to her. So she called her up on the phone and so she handed me the phone and I was like, hi, I know this is really strange. We're Americans living in, a different part of Thailand, and we really feel like God's called us to this area. And so I'm like, I know that, just hang tight a second. I'm going to tell you, explain why I'm calling you. And she goes, oh, let you talk to my dad. So she puts her dad on the phone and they're like, come to our house. It's like 20 minutes away or something. And so we went out to this village and the parents came out and her dad, who was probably in his 50s then, you think 60s maybe. And he said, oh, my dad was one of the first believers around here. And my parents became believers. The Finnish missionaries came through here. And they're like, there's a couple families. Look, and then they call people. And several people came. And they just said, they said, we're like sheep without a shepherd. That's what they said to us. We had the missionaries that lived here, but now we have nobody. And would you come and be our friends and teach us the Bible? And we try as best we can. And I remember one of the ladies saying, we really want to follow Jesus, but all of our neighbors are Buddhists and they do all the Buddhist things. And it's just really hard not to join in and do what they do. We really want to love Jesus. And so anyway, that's one of the ways that we ended up in the place where we ended up, where God just leads you. It's like Brian said, one step at a time, one person at a time. You just kind of follow the trail and have courage that he's going to speak. Take courage that you're not alone in it and he's going to show you. And we often don't get the next step until it's time for the next step. It just looks like darkness and mist.
I remember talking to this young lady at the hotel we were staying at, and we would go to breakfast in the morning and she would serve us. She brings stuff to us and things like that. We talked to her and we began to share with her and found out she had some things that were going on in her life. And she came and talked to us in our room one night. We prayed for her.
Yeah, she just knocked on the door one night and said, "Can I come in?"
Yeah. And so she was very open. And I remember her saying to us, we don't know what Christians are because we've never seen one. So we don't know how they act or how they live or what they're like. And so we don't know what to believe about this. And so we're thinking, well, this is a good place to be then, you know. And so we went with a very incarnational model. We're just going to go live in this village and be us and be Jesus to these people and live among them. I remember going to the city hall and saying, what can I do to help? You know, what do you have needs for? And of course it was English teaching. And so we did teaching in the school. We opened up a little place on the street and offered free English lessons to the kids. And we did sustainable agriculture. We did all kinds of things just to be in the community and be a part of the community, help the community in some way. We actually originally went to Thailand as missionaries. We told everybody we're missionaries. We went up here. We said we're volunteers working with a foundation. And we know Jesus. We love Jesus too. So we're followers of Jesus. That was the identity that we presented there because we wanted to just love people where they were at, as they were, and show them the love of Christ. We had people come into our home and we did worship in our home in this village. You know, at night it's very quiet in these villages and we're worshiping in our home. And one of the neighbors said they just all opened up their windows so they could hear us better. Yeah. And we first went into this village, we walked over to say hi to the neighbors. They just stared at us and we talked to them. But now if we walked into this village, they would accept us into their home like we're one of them.
We went back to visit not too long before we came back, and they exploded like, "Oh, they're back! Everybody get out here! Get out of your houses!" And they went around and pulled everybody out into the street and said, "They're back! Oh, and look at these kids, and they're so big! And oh, we remember when you were a baby. We remember when you were born. Oh, Brian and Mary Beth are back!" And so it was like a family reunion going back into the village.
So neat.
Yeah.
We're nearing the end of our interview today, so we want to hear, your crazy stories. You mentioned a few, so will you start out with whatever crazy story comes to mind?
In that same village that we were living in, we just talked about, one morning one of the neighbors came over, and this neighbor was very sweet, but she was very not open to the gospel at all, but very kind, very sweet lady. And she came over and she wanted to talk to me, and she said, my mom has been walking back and forth in her home, wringing her hands. She had Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and she's wringing her hands, and she just cries out all night long. She doesn't sleep. She hasn't slept in a week. And we think
they had taken her to the witch doctor. It wasn't just her things. So that often happens where they'll go to the witch doctor and then things get worse.
Yeah, so at that time, a good friend of mine, Barry McKnight, missionary from England, and they were one of those people that Barry and Rowena McKnight, and God placed them in our life, and they were mentors to us in a lot of ways, but they were visiting us. And she came and said this, and Barry looks at me, and he says, okay, let's go. So we went out to this village, which was probably about 20 minutes from us, even deeper. It was very close to the border of Laos, actually. And we went into her house, and we prayed in there with her, probably for like an hour, and we didn't see any change. We just kind of went home feeling a little bit discouraged, like nothing happened, and it was really crazy time too. And we got home and we just prayed again with Mary Beth and Rowena. We prayed again for her. In the morning, she came over to the house. The daughter came over to the house. She said she slept all night. So it wasn't just that she was wringing her hands and making a bunch of noise. It was she kept the whole village up. And so it was like the whole village saw this miracle. These white guys come and pray for this lady to get free of this demon, and she got free. And so it did open up a lot of hearts in that particular village because they saw that, well, this God you serve is real.
That's amazing. Wow.
I think, when we first talked about this podcast, we were talking about, like a couple years ago, we were talking about naming it like the stories you don't tell your mom.
Yes. Yep.
So there's a lot of those. And, we would tell our kids sometimes, like we go back on furlough, don't tell don't tell your grandparents that this happened or something would happen. We say, don't tell them on the phone when you talk to them that this happened. We don't want to worry them. And so there's, there's like scary stories that happen where God did amazing things. And then there's hilarious stories where you just think, we would look at each other sometimes and go, nobody would believe this if we told them. If we wrote it in our newsletter, people would think we were lying about this. So one of the stories that I told you earlier was we were cat sitting for some missionaries who had gone back on furlough, and they had lost their cats, I think, to in a flood, another furlough. So they said, well, let's leave them in the city anyway. So we were in a village then too. And so one night my neighbor comes over, my Thai neighbor, and she goes, who was also on a team with us and someone we love very much. And she said, he's cut his stomach open. He's cut his stomach open. And I said, what? And she was this great animal lover, and she couldn't stand for an animal to be hurt at all. So we look, and this cat has literally just like sliced his stomach between the skin and the inside. So there's no blood. It just looks like somebody took, I know it's gross. It's terrible. Yes, just opened up, just skinned part of this cat's stomach open. And so we don't know if the cat's going to live or die. This is like a village street cat, just, I'm thinking these little girls are back on furlough and they're going to be devastated if they come home and their cat's dead. They left it with their auntie and uncle here, and we're going to have crying baby girls. And so another girl that was with us on our team, another American girl, she wrapped the cat in a towel, and we got in the car. I don't even know where to go because it's a long time ago in South Thailand. So I know that there was one clinic in the city that had just opened up, and they had this big sign that said like animal emergency room or something. So I knew that there was one place we could go. And so I don't know if anybody's ever tried to hold a cat in their lap, wrapped up in a towel. We don't have cages or anything like that. And so the cat's just going everywhere in the car, and I'm driving, and it's like running through the car, scratching. Like I'm trying to drive. I'm like, get it, grab it. She's like, I'm trying. It's going crazy. And I'm like, is it going to die? Anyway, so we get to this, it's dark. I don't know what time it is at night. It was getting late. And I'm like, it says emergency room, and it's dark here. There's nothing. And so there's the security guard sitting there, probably sleeping. And we said, we have a cat and we need an emergency. We have an emergency. And he's like, oh, I'll go around the back and get the doctor. And
my goodness, take your time.
Yes. And so we're just standing there going, what are we doing? It's like pitch black out here in front of this new clinic, and the security guard is making us no promises. He was like, I don't know if I can or not. I'm like, your sign literally says 24-hour emergency care. So he goes and he gets the doctor, and the doctor's so grumpy. He's wiping the sleep out of his eyes, and he's like, people will just come and ring my doorbell all the time. And I used to live in this other place in Bangkok. I think it was in Bangkok or some city. And he's like, they were always waking up my wife and kids and knocking on the door, and that's why I have to sleep. He just didn't stop. Like in the movies or the cartoon character that he just didn't. And so we just keep giggling. And at this point we're going, this is just really weird. So we're in the dark in this clinic, and he's like, what's the cat's name? And we just looked at each other and we're like, well, we knew the names of the two cats, but we didn't know which one was which ever. For months we just kept these cats and didn't know which one was which. And so we're like, it's either this or this. And he just looks at me like, you're an idiot. And so I just gave him one of the names. And anyway, we walk back these dark corridors. It's dark in this animal hospital that they've just built, new in the city. We're walking back with this man, and he's so grumpy. And he sits down in this room, and he says, all right, give me the information about the cat. And I'm like, he's going to think we've like stolen somebody's cat or something. And he goes, I'm open after hours, but it costs a lot more. And he said, I worked in Bangkok, and people would just bring their animals in for vaccinations. They'd have to pay an extra 1,000 baht. They didn't care. They were rich. They had money. They just bring them in for routine care after hours. They didn't even. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he's like really not happy about being a veterinarian. And so I'm thinking, I don't know what to, should I comfort him or like apologize? I don't know what to do. And so he's like, all right, come with me. And I have no answers for him about the cats. I don't know how old they are. I don't know what the cat's name is. And I'm thinking, I don't even think it's worth probably saving this cat, except I'm thinking about the little girls. Yes. And so he's like, follow me. And he goes back down these dark corridors. And we're like, okay, we're alone in this hospital in the dark with this cat whose like insides are falling out. And with a man we don't know. I'm like, this is so stupid. But all we could do was just giggle and laugh. I mean, like schoolgirls. I felt like I was 12 again at like 3:00 in the morning at a sleepover where you just cannot stop laughing. And so we go into this room and he goes, you're going to have to help me. I don't have an assistant here. You have to do this. And I said, okay. And so he says, hold the cat while I give it the anesthesia or anesthetic or whatever it's called. Knock the cat out. I don't know. And so I said, okay. And so he's like, you got to hold it good. I said, okay. And I have never owned a cat, I don't think, at this point. I'm not sure. I didn't grow up with cats. And so I don't know how to hold a cat. Really, I don't. That would be Brian, actually. I should have sent you. I don't know why I didn't send you, actually. So I'm holding the cat, and as soon as he sticks it with the needle, the cat goes crazy, biting and clawing and scratching. And so on reflex, I just let go of the cat. Oh, the doctor was so mad at me. And the cat just like jumps off the table and then starts stumbling around like a drunk person. And then like, it sounds like it's dying. And he just waits there for the whatever he got in it to take effect. And it just like falls over on the ground. And then he picks it up and he turns it over on its back and ties its 4 paws out like the 4 directions of a compass, like to this table with this cellophane string, this plastic cellophane rope. And we can't stop laughing. It's horrible. And I know it's horrible and it's rude and it's completely awful, but we just couldn't stop laughing. I kept looking at my friend going, stop it. She's like, I can't. I said, stop laughing. Like at this point, I think he thinks we're making fun of him, and we totally weren't. I mean, I was thankful for him. And so anyway, he just looks at it and goes, you all can just leave. So we just went outside in the dark hallway and sat in the pitch black and just laughed. I'm like, how do we get ourselves into these situations? It's like midnight and there's surgery going on this cat and we're going to pay so much money for anyway, later we after the cat was recovered and we called or we emailed or something to talk to the missionaries, and he goes, oh, I wouldn't have spent that. I'd have just let the cat go.
No. Oh my goodness.
Anyway.
That is crazy.
I don't think we've had a story like that yet.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I've ever heard a story like that.
That's great.
Thank you guys. I think you gave us a lot of good nuggets, and anyone listening who's interested in becoming a missionary, I feel like you gave such good insight.
Well, I love hearing your story. I don't know if I've ever heard that about the testimony on how you felt called to missions and just your prayer and your heart in that. It resounds with me and kind of what I went through as a youngster, being on the field for the first time and going, I want to do this for the rest of my life, like falling in love with missions and other cultures. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.